Yum, yum!
Greg here from Pixel Fondue. So this one I think is really cool. We're going to be scattering random images on a mesh. And I think that is a really useful thing if you want to scatter random images of cracks like decals, really random decals, say like cracks or divots or craters on an asphalt road or graffiti, which I'm going to show here, or whatever. It's like a super useful thing to do. And I think I had forgotten how to do it, and I was messing around and sort of retaught myself how to do it. Anyway, I think this one's really cool. So it's a little finicky, so follow along in order because there's definitely at least one bug in here. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with holding shift and creating a plane. All right, and I'll select the plane. I'll make a material. We'll just call it plane. That's fine. And while it's selected, I'm going to hit Shift D for subdivide and faceted, and just do that like 2 or 3 times. That's just for a little trick later. It's not super necessary, but anyway, so we've got our plane here and we've got a plane here. Now in the image tab, I've already loaded up some decals. You can see them here. These are just from Quixel, and they'll have a 32-bit. They're like 32-bit pings, right? They have a built-in alpha. So if you look at them in Photoshop, it's like this, right? They have a built-in transparency. It's just a ping with built-in transparency. That's actually kind of important. It has to have a built-in alpha. It doesn't necessarily have to be a transparent ping, but it has to have an alpha. So a Targo with an alpha or whatever. Okay, so here's how you do it. And again, like, it's a little weird. There's a couple of bugs in it, or at least one bug. So I'm just doing this in a sort of weird order. But first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some particles or some points to use as projection points for our images. And what I'm going to do with this guy selected here is I'm just going to go over to the sculpting tab, and under particle tools, I'm going to say particle paint. And then actually I'm going to change my viewport settings just so you can see this a little bit better. For inactive meshes, I'll turn inactive same as active off. And so our inactive is going to have different properties than our active mesh. And I'm going to say show vertices always, where on our active mesh, I'm going to have show vertices never. So what I'm going to do here is when I start painting, you'll see these little yellow dots appear. These are just vertices that I'm painting. It actually creates a child mesh called particle mesh here of your plane that you're painting on. And that's why I did that sort of viewport thing. So the inactive vertices are showing here. And so you could just paint a bunch of these on here. Like that. That's super dense. We don't actually want a ton of them. So once you get done painting, just press Q to drop that tool, select your particle mesh. And now we're seeing the inactive vertices here. So I'm just going to go back and turn off my inactive. We'll set that back to never, and we'll make active same as inactive. And then I'm just going to toggle my verts on here. And we'll just, we can actually, we don't need this parented anymore, actually. And I'm just going to isolate that so we can just see these guys. And I know that's a lot of fiddling around with the viewport, but it's just hopefully easier for you guys to see. So then under vertex, we'll just do our merge vertex tool, and then you just click and drag, and as you drag, it increases this merge distance here. So any vertices within that distance get welded together. We're just sort of reducing the number of vertices, something sort of normal like that. That's fine, I think. And so there we go. So here's our vertices there. You can kind of see them. In fact, again, if I do this thing and say make it inactive, same as active, turn that off, you can see just the vertices there. So hopefully that works. I'll just leave that on for the rest of the show here. So there we go. So now we're going to I'm just going back into item mode. Over in the shader tree, this is the important part. We're going to select your material, and then under add layer, go to image, and then new, and it's kind of going off the screen here, but you'll see new image folder. Don't do new image group. That's for layered images, or new image or new image sequence. Do the very top one, new image folder. Select that, and you'll just see it did a couple things. It put it here in the shader tree, and it's set to diffuse color. It also dropped a folder here with a little plus on it here in the clip list, and it's got this. The folder has a item in it called folder. Okay, and that's this thing here in the shader tree. So this is the sort of cool part. Go to texture locator, and for particle source, set that to particle mesh. And so what we just did here is instead of projecting like UVs or doing like a UV mapping or planar projection or spherical projection, each of those little vertices there, each of those little black dots is going to be sort of a local projection for each of these images. And then I'm just going to grab all of these guys and I'm going to drag them into my folder. Now, one of the, now you'll see they're all here on the viewport, right? So one of the little issues is there's a little update problem with the folder. If you dragged them into the folder and you didn't see any change in this clip list, you could just flip over to something else to flip back and it should look good. Now, this isn't actually a correct projection in here, right? They're just sort of being planar projected in the viewport. But if I open up a render view here and start render preview and start hitting preview render, you'll see I've got a bunch of different images here in the viewport. So this is what we want. Now over here in the folder, just to make this a little bit cleaner, I'm going to turn off GL display so I don't have to look at them over there because I'm going to be doing, and I can close this now, because I'm going to be doing a lot of adjustments here. So now in my texture locator here for my folder texture, I'm going to do a couple things. One, I'm going to turn fall off bias to 0. And you'll see this little sort of rounded thing here. What that is, if I turn that to 0 and, turn fall off gain to 100 and that to 0. So fall off bias 0, fall off gain 100. You'll see everything's solid now. What the bias is, it's actually a little sort of radial gradient around these that if I drag it, you'll see these little circles appearing around here. Just push in. You'll see the little circle there. If I drag this up, I just get this little circle, and then the gain will feather that out. You know, so that's actually super useful if you're doing some like different sorts of projections. Like maybe they're like organic details like bumps and cracks and things like that, and they sort of want them to blend in. Those are useful. For graffiti, you don't want this blendy stuff, right? So we're going to get rid of that by saying bias to 0 and gain to 100. Now we've got all these controls now over here. So I can do stuff like random size, like 33%, or just change the particle size in general to like 0.5 to make them all bigger. Maybe that's a little too big, maybe 0.3. And I can, again, like change random size on these guys. You can see them moving in the viewport there. I could do rotation, where they're all going to rotate, or do random rotation, so each of the particles rotates randomly. So I'm rotating all these guys around randomly. Pretty cool. There's even down here a texture offset where you can set our random offsets to particles and texture replicas, and then just drag that offset up. You can see them sort of moving around up here. So it's just more control. But what's really cool is, I'm just undoing this, is that since this is MODO, I'll turn the random rotations back to 0, the random size back to 0, I can do all kinds of stuff because particles and vertices and even particle simulations can all be treated as equal citizens. So if you look at my particle mesh here, these are the little vertices, these guys right here, they have a couple of vertex maps on them, a p-size map and a transform map. And these are really useful. So I can grab a particle down here in the middle and I can just select transform and I can move it around. So I'm moving around this guy right here. I can go to scale. Even though it's a particle, I can scale it up and make it bigger like that. So it's running out of the maximum particle size a little bit on the texture locator here. So if you want to make them really big, you're going to want to up the particle size a little bit, but I can go really small like that, make it big, whatever. And I can also rotate it around. So I have really exact placement for these just by moving them around with the transform tool. So I'm just transforming points. I could even rotate points and scale points. And those transforms are stored in this map here. So it's actually a really powerful, this transform map is holding a lot of data. Particle size map as well. So I can even grab this guy here and adjust the particle size. That's just a weight. So you can actually use the weight tool. So I can come over here and adjust weights and just, you can see like the little percentage. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's a little ghosted there. It's like, I can adjust the weights just like a weight map. You're just adjusting the weight like you would in a weight map, right? So it's particle size weight. I'm just using a weight tool to do that. So again, I have, control with it there. And there's other stuff you can do. I can actually just use more of these particle tools over here. I can go to size and set like a value 50% and just sort of, paint on these guys and change the size of these guys, right? Let me just zoom out here so you can see more what's going on. So I'm just painting size on there. You can also even just, change, use spin and do some other stuff. There's all kinds of tools over there you can use to just mess with your particles. Again, like I said, they're just equal citizens. So I go to the schematic here and I drag in my texture locator. We can just kind of see how this is set up in the schematic so you can see the flow of data. Double click on these yellow diamonds. So my image is this special image, which is a folder image. And we dragged actual images inside that. And that's the image into my image texture. And then I've got my texture locator here, and I have a particle source, which is that particle mesh inside that texture locator, right? But like I said, I can select this connection here, make it turn yellow, and add like a particle random modifier. Okay, I just added that, and you see everything kind of changed there. And we just 0 and Control Enter to put that back to where it was. But I can adjust scaling here or rotation here if I want to, right? So I can randomize rotation here, and I can do it in a particle random modifier. I can sieve these particles out. I can use all my particle modifiers to mess with this stuff. I can go to uniform scaling and adjust the scaling there. So, and again, we're just running out of the maximum size. So I'm pretty sure if I just bump this particle size up, then I should be able to stay out of that window. Maybe not, actually. So there may be a bit of particle size where we run out of the alpha a little bit, just as a note. But you can adjust all this stuff with particle modifiers or transforms. And there's some really weird stuff you can do. So like, check this out. So I've got my mesh here, and I put all those divisions in it, right? I can add a vector map. So I can go in here and go to vertex maps, and other maps, hit new map, and go to a vector map, just called vector, hit OK. Now there's a vector map there, and you can see these little look like hairs there. And this was all implemented back when the hair tools were implemented. Just nobody ever uses them. You can use them for different things. They're can be used for a number of different things, but they're kind of cool. Anyway, so those define directions. And so if I go to my texture locator here, right, and pick a vector map, I can pick my vector map here. And it goes kind of weird because the vectors, I don't believe, have any values initially. But I can go to my hair tools and go to like comb and start like brushing over these, and it's going to feed values into those vectors. And so let me just sort of scooch this over and sort of make everything a little bit bigger here. In fact, maybe I'll make a wireframe so you can see what's going on here. So I'm just sort of combing in here, and I see everything kind of coming back to life. But I could do like really weird sort of swirly direction stuff here. And it's just really cool, right? You could just like do a bunch of weird. So again, if you're trying to get organic stuff or want to do some weird sort of abstract stuff, you can use these vector maps to control the sort of orientation of your textures in a really sort of local level. It's sort of deforming that projected texture with the closest vector, if that makes sense. So you can do, again, some really interesting stuff. I'd really be interested if people mess around with this, just using these hair tools to go in here and just mess around with this stuff and just warp and distort these textures. So there's that. So lots of cool stuff. I'm gonna turn that off actually. And you know, the one bug I did bump into, which I should show you guys, is it's really kind of weird. So I've got a couple. So we've got our whatever, our graffiti on our plane. We can have it on a wall or whatever. And let's load up another texture in here. So I'm going to use the load PBR. I'm just going to load up a couple of interesting textures from Quixel. Whoops, let me just, sorry, I'm just scale this down a little bit here. So, right, so rough rock. Let's just grab albedo and normal and roughness and hit OK. And it'll bring those into MODO, and it's putting them underneath our folder there. So I think I can go back to advanced viewport here. Why don't I, well, why don't I delete that vector map? It's sort of weird, so we'll just delete that guy. Everything back to normal. And you can see that it's nicely, you know, everything is on top of there. And so I can even, let's load up one more here. So let's do another PBR, and I think I can load like maybe an asphalt. Asphalt fresh sounds good. We'll do again normal roughness and just albedo. And MODO will automatically, if you have your, I have another tutorial on this on Pixel Fondue. It'll set all of these channels automatically, right? So normal goes to normal, roughness goes to roughness, albedo goes to diffuse color. These are all set up here in this preferences pop over, right? So you can set all your different preferences here. Albedo goes to diffuse color, like roughness goes to bump. I've got a bunch of custom definitions like you know, group and group mask, and mask go to like group mask, and so like opacity goes to stencil. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. MODO should ship with most of these in the right order. But here you can see like a problem, right? Now all of these guys, if I am correct, they're going to be set to UV, right? So they're set to UV, and we lose all our texture variation. It's just grabbing one image. But if I grab these texture locators for this asphalt and set them to planar, we get all our different images back. So that's that weird bug I was talking about. You know, if it's mixed in with UV projected textures, for whatever reason, we lose our planarness. So if we're going to do, you know, different textures here, just make sure they're projected. So not UV, solid, planar, whatever. There's going to be in the next MODO, there's going to be a triplanar, which is going to be great. So we don't have to really worry about this. You just set everything to triplanar. But anyway, so there's that. There's like one other thing that's kind of weird and interesting. So if I come in here, and you'll see some of that normal map from underneath. If I go to my folder here, my folder images, it's got one more control on the texture locator called local normal attenuation. And that seems to, if I turn that on, you can see a slight difference here. So again, let me just sort of turn that off. You can see the difference. I'm turning it back on. You see like the normal map is sort of showing through more. It seems to erode that texture on a sharp normal slope, which makes it sort of worn looking. I don't know if that's the intended use for it. By the way, if you think all this stuff's documented, it's not. At least I can't find it. So it's a super useful thing to be able to do this. And like I said, you can even do something really weird. Like check this out. Maybe for the finale here, I'll see if I can do some sort of particle simulation. So let me just pop this open. I'm going to select my plane here, and I'm going to go to my setup tab here, and go to particles and do a surface emitter. And so what that just did, let me just drag this down into the schematic. My plane is now emitting particles into and let me just go to wireframe so you can see them. See the particles being emitted by the plane there. So let me just do a quick simulation, and you can see them there, right? Now, what's weird is I can use this particle simulation as a particle source for the textures. So let's go back to the shader tree and our folder here. Instead of this particle modifier, we're going to use a particle simulation for textures, and you can kind of see them in here. And let's just reduce this to like maybe 0.1 or so, or maybe 0.2, and start dragging through the simulation. You see them coming on and off like that. Now, I haven't tried this with image sequences, and I wonder if you can load an image sequence, if you could just drag an image sequence into the folder here instead of just dragging still images. So if you have an image sequence, obviously you have ripples and these particles. So what I would really do is have particle plane above raining particles down. But as the particles pass by this surface here, get within, you know, that radius in this radius right here, 0.2. Once they get within like 0.2, that little virtual sphere, they're going to start affecting that surface. And so you might be able to get like, you know, have 3 or 4 different sort of ripple sequences for your like rain animation, and use this method to have, you know how rain animations always look fake because it's the same like ripple animation, like just everywhere. I have like 10 different ripple animations. I hope this will work. That you can use image sequence instead of images, as well as images in the image folder, and have each of those. Every time a particle goes through that space, it's going to create a different ripple sequence, just like we have different textures, different graffiti on here. So it's a really powerful combination of using texture, this image folder, with the particle source, the texture replicator particle source, or texture replicas. It's a really powerful combination. So there's that. Hope this was useful. I thought it was really cool. And until next time.
Yum, yum!